Japanese folklore can often provide a rich resource of inspiration for a writer delving into the fantastically mythological. With a vibrant culture blending Shinto animism and Buddhist philosophy, the tales of such creatures, such as Oni, Kappa, and Yokai, can offer readers, especially Western readers, a different take on something familiar. I'm your host, Garrett K. Jones. Join me as we jump into the first interview of the 2024 Author Awareness April Marathon. Welcome to The Right Way, where we talk book recommendations, creative writing tips, and this month especially, author interviews. I have a great marathon ready to go for you, but I have a few announcements before we slide into this week's conversation, starting with Free Comic Book Day and Star Wars Day. That's going to be coming up in just 4 weeks from today, and I'm excited because while there has been some proximity in the past between these two events, it's rare that they actually overlap. I'll be down at DJ's Collectible Shop in beautiful downtown Hanford, signing and selling copies of all 5 books in my ongoing fantasy series, The Archives of Isink Ran. I love getting opportunities to talk with prospective readers, as well as catch up with people already getting into the series. Now, if you don't know anything about my series, check out this trailer for Book 2, The Destiny of Dragons.
Now that he's back from the dead, Gavin Lake, the bastard orphan turned ranger, has decided to fully embrace his destiny. But what does that mean? The woman he loved has been murdered. The soul of the dragon he was bonded with has been obliterated. The adventure broadens, taking the dragon mist across the high seas where danger lurks in every depth and powerful lessons are learned in previously unexplored lands. Gavin has nothing to lose as he enters a new phase in his mission to face off against his greatest enemy and discover the destiny of dragons.
So I'm excited to kick off this year's interview marathon by welcoming back a returning author. As I mentioned in last week's author showcase, my guest Kereah Keller made her first appearance on the show back at the start of season 3. She was focused on promoting her book Splitter, which has some elements that do feel like they were taken not just out of survival horror video games, but also from Japanese folklore. She has continued that latter thread in her more recent work. So let's get reacquainted with Kereah. Hey Kereah, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show. What have you been working on?
Oh, what have I not been working on should be the question. I like to work on several different projects at a time, usually in different genres. That way I can kind of always have something to be working on. Admittedly, while I do have 4 or 5 manuscripts I'm working on, there's only one that I'm currently writing. And it's actually quite different for what I usually do. I don't write contemporary, but I'm challenging myself with writing contemporary, still Japanese folklore based, because that's just what I like to write, but takes place more in Japanese school as well as the home life, rather than it being like a fantastical or spirit realm type of setting.
That's really cool. And we've talked before about how you've gotten into writing and stuff like that. The last time I had you on the show, you were promoting Splitter, which was a kind of a video game based premise. That was a really fun book. So how'd you move on from doing something like that to doing stuff with the Japanese folklore?
So I've been into anime and manga since I was 11 or 12 years old. Naruto was like one of the first things that I watched. And I watched it in secret because in high school it wasn't cool, to like that kind of stuff. So kind of kept that, on the DL for a while. But after my husband and I got married, we started watching stuff together and found a lot of different shows that we really like. And there were a lot of different anime that I came across that I loved the concept of. I loved the characters for, but there were just always something that like they never quite explored. There was like a plot thread that like didn't quite get tied the way that it should be, or there was a character that like they could have done so much more with. And so that was something that I wanted to explore with books, is to take something very similar, something that people are familiar with, the kitsune, the oni, the tengu, but explore those different parts that like manga and anime don't really touch upon. And so that's where the idea for a lot of my Japanese folklore have come from. They're just different plot threads that I've seen throughout anime that like have sparked something, and I've been like, oh, that would be a really cool concept. So a lot of it has just been one specific scene in something that we're writing, or a specific character that kind of is in one episode, has a really unique personality, but then kind of goes away. And so I take that and I'm like, all right, what can I do with this that would be interesting, that people would want to read about?
Obviously, Japanese folklore and anime is a big inspiration for you. So that prompts my next question of what are some other inspirations that you are currently drawing from?
I always draw from my personal life, growing up, a lot of experiences that I've had, the good and the bad. I am the oldest of 4 children, and I was not the favorite child, to say the least. And I was made fun of a lot in school, picked upon. I also grew up in a very religious household. So there was a lot that played into, Shrine of Unanswered Prayers is very religious. I mean, the main character is atheist at the beginning, but a lot of that came from my experience of, not being well liked by people, or having, opinions that weren't well received. And specifically when I started writing Shrine of Unanswered Prayers, I was struggling with my faith, and my religion and how I had grown up. And so while I was writing it, I was kind of figuring out for myself, what did I believe? What did I not believe? And so a lot of that poured into Hinako when I was writing her. And the different things that I have personally struggled with that I could put into her that would kind of struggle with the same type of thing. So there's always some kind of point that I draw for myself, whether it was, being made fun of, or whether it was, my siblings getting, all of the attention and stuff and not feeling, that I had, or whatever it is. There's always that connection between myself and the main character.
What has been one of the hardest parts or the biggest challenges that you've been currently working through?
With Shrine of Unanswered Prayers, my biggest struggle has been marketing. My books prior have kind of sold a lot better just because the genres were more widely accepted. Horror is kind of more easy to sell than a lot of Japanese folklore. So I have come to a wall with Shrine of Unanswered Prayers of it not being quite as well received as I was hoping. And I've made it a point that it is my favorite book that I've written out of everything, but I found it really hard to market myself, and to market my book, because I usually don't do myself justice. I have a hard time presenting myself, and selling my book on stuff. So marketing has been a real struggle lately. I don't remember exactly what I did with Splitter other than like the interview with you. So I'm trying to figure out from a standpoint what I did differently this time that I didn't do in the past that's kind of given me trouble. But overall with writing, I would say my biggest hurdle would just be trying not to write the same stuff. Especially because my focus has been on Japanese folklore, because that is something that I'm super passionate about. It's something that I feel that I write well, but I don't want to keep going back to the same mythology or the same type of characters. And so trying to find again, that balance of using stuff from my own life or people from my own life, but not like always using the same characters, like always having a Kitsune or always having an Oni, or, trying to pull from different parts of folklore, without it being something that like nobody's ever heard of, while still trying to make it somewhat interesting, that it's still going to catch attention. And that's been a little bit of a struggle with seeing how Shrine of Unanswered Prayers hasn't been super well received. So there's that voice in the back of my head that's still kind of like, why are you writing this stuff if, there aren't a whole lot of people that want to read it?
Yeah.
So working through a lot of that as well, with trying to find what I want to do and what also is going to be well received by readers.
What is some advice that you have for other would-be authors out there?
Oh boy. Where do I even begin with that? I know it's cliche to say, don't give up, or to write what you know. I think for me, the biggest thing that I have learned over the last year, with my kids being in and out of the hospital, with, my husband and all the kind of health scares that we have, is to enjoy the small moments, even with writing. And I know that sounds weird because, you're writing a book, you're writing characters and stuff, but don't overlook the small interactions in a scene. It may seem like it's completely pointless, those couple of lines, or, that one scene could impact a reader, that you don't even know. And I know we get so hung up on the action scenes or the romance scenes or the ones that have all the fireworks and, the big displays and stuff. But the smaller scenes, the ones that are more quiet, that are, just not there as filler, but just kind of, to normalize the story, those are just as important, if not more important, to the character and the character development and the story overall. And so while it's important to remember that with stuff, in life, while it's important to stop and spend time with my kids while they are this young, so, I don't lose out on that. It's the same for characters in a book.
Kereah, how can people get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of your books? How can they connect with you and just help you get your work out there?
I'm kind of all over the place. With social media, I've been pretty much active on Instagram. I still kind of have a Facebook page, but I don't super do a whole lot with it. But they can find me just under Kereah Keller. I also do have my own website, KereahKeller.com. That'll have a lot of the books that I'm currently working on, as well as my editorial business that I am still offering if anyone is interested in edits. But other than that, my website, I have a box down at the bottom of every page of how you can contact me, and I'm usually pretty quick getting back to people.
Well, Kereah, thank you for being back on the show. It has been a pleasure to have you.
Oh, I've loved being back on it. I missed this so much. It was enjoyable. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. A huge thank you to Kereah Keller for being my opening guest for Author Awareness April. If you're interested in picking up copies of her work or to connect with her through social media, you can find all of those links down in the video description. If you'd like to see a longer uncut edition of my conversation with her by becoming a channel supporter on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/GKJPublishing for as little as $1 a month. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so, make sure to click like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications on new videos just like this one. I'll be back next week with the second interview for this year's marathon with Christian fantasy writer Caitlin King. I'll see you then.